growing in the years ahead. These are all areas in which Donald Trump and I profoundly disagree, and they are all critical to our future. First, we need to be strong at home. That means investing in our infrastructure, education, and innovation, the fundamentals of a strong economy. We need to reduce income inequality because our country can't lead effectively when so many are struggling to provide the basics for their families. And we need to break down the barriers that hold Americans back, including barriers of bigotry and discrimination. Compare that with what Trump wants to do. His economic plans would add more than $30 trillion, that's trillion with a T, $30 trillion to our national debt over the next 20 years. He has no ideas on education, no ideas on innovation. He has a lot of ideas about who to blame, but no clue about what to do. None of what Donald Trump is offering will make America stronger at home, and that would make us weaker in the world. Second, we need to stick with our allies. America's network of allies is part of what makes us exceptional, and our allies deliver for us every day. Our armed forces fight terrorists together. Our diplomats work side by side. Allies provide staging areas for our military so we can respond quickly to events on the other side of the world. And they share intelligence that helps us identify and diffuse potential threats. Take the threat posed by North Korea, perhaps the most repressive regime on the planet, run by a sadistic dictator who wants to develop long-range missiles that could carry a nuclear weapon to the United States. When I was Secretary of State, we worked closely with our allies, Japan and South Korea, to respond to this threat, including by creating a missile defense system that stands ready to shoot down a North Korean warhead should its leaders ever be reckless enough to launch one at us. The technology is ours. Key parts of it are located on Japanese ships. All three countries contributed to it, and this month, all three of our militaries will run a joint drill to test it. That's the power of allies. And it's also the legacy of American troops who fought and died to secure those bonds because they knew we were safer with friends and partners. Now, Moscow and Beijing are deeply envious of our alliances around the world because they have nothing to match them. They'd love for us to elect a president who would jeopardize that source of strength. If Donald gets his way, they'll be celebrating in the Kremlin. We cannot let that happen. That's why it is no small passing thing when he talks about leaving NATO or says he'll stay neutral on Israel's security. It's no small thing when he calls Mexican immigrants rapists and murderers. We're lucky to have two friendly neighbors on our land borders. Why would he want to make one of them an enemy? And it's no small thing when he suggests that America should withdraw our military support for Japan, encourage them to get nuclear weapons. And he said this about a war between Japan and North Korea, and I quote, "If they do, they do. Good luck. Enjoy yourself, folks." I wonder if he even realizes he's talking about nuclear war. Yes, our friends need to contribute their fair share. I made that point long before Donald Trump came onto the scene, and a number of them have increased their defense spending. The real debate here is whether we keep those alliances strong or cut them off. What he says would weaken our country. Third, we need to embrace all the tools of American power, especially diplomacy and development, to be on the front lines solving problems before they threaten us at home. Diplomacy is often the only way to avoid a conflict that could end up exacting a much greater cost. It takes patience, persistence, and an eye on the long game, but it's worth it. Take the nuclear agreement with Iran. When President Obama took office, Iran was racing toward a nuclear bomb. Some called for military action, but that could have ignited a broader war that could have mired our troops in another Middle Eastern conflict. President Obama chose a different path, and I got to work leading the effort to impose crippling sanctions. We brought Iran to the table, we began talks, and eventually we reached an agreement that should block every path for Iran to get a nuclear weapon. Now we must enforce that deal vigorously. And as I've said many times before, our approach must be distrust and verify. The world must understand that the United States will act decisively if necessary, including with military action to stop Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. In particular, Israel's security is non-negotiable. They're our closest ally in the region, and we have a moral obligation to defend them. But there is no question that the world and the United States, we are safer now than we were before this agreement. And we accomplished it without firing a single shot, dropping a single bomb, or putting a single American soldier in harm's way. Now, Donald Trump says we shouldn't have done the deal. We should have walked away. But that would have meant no more global sanctions and Iran resuming their nuclear program and the world blaming us. So then what? War? Telling the world, good luck, you deal with Iran? Of course, Trump doesn't have answers to those questions. Donald Trump doesn't know the first thing about Iran or its nuclear program. Ask him. It'll become very clear very quickly. You know, there's no risk of people losing their lives if you blow up a golf course deal. But it doesn't work like that in world affairs. Just like being interviewed on the same episode of 60 Minutes as Putin was, is not the same thing as actually dealing with Putin. So the stakes in global statecraft are infinitely higher and more complex than in the world of luxury hotels. We all know the tools Donald Trump brings to the table: bragging, mocking, composing nasty tweets. I'm willing to bet he's writing a few right now. But those tools won't do the trick. Rather than solving global crises, he would create new ones. He has no sense of what it takes to deal with multiple countries with competing interests and reaching a solution that everyone can get behind. In fact, he is downright contemptuous of that work. And that means he's much more likely to end up leading us into conflict. Fourth, we need to be firm but wise with our rivals. Countries like Russia and China often work against us. Beijing dumps cheap steel in our markets. That hurts American workers. Moscow has taken aggressive military action in Ukraine, right on NATO's doorstep. Now, I've gone toe-to-toe with Russia and China and many other different leaders around the world. So I know we have to be able to both stand our ground when we must and find common ground when we can. That's how I could work with Russia to conclude the New START treaty to reduce nuclear stockpiles, and with China to increase pressure on North Korea. It's how our diplomats negotiated the landmark agreement on climate change, which Trump now wants to rip up. The key was never forgetting who we were dealing with. Not friends or allies, but countries that share some common interests with us amid many disagreements. Donald doesn't see the complexity. He wants to start a trade war with China. And I understand a lot of Americans have concerns about our trade agreements. I do too. But a trade war is something very different. We went down that road in the 1930s. It made the Great Depression longer and more painful. Combine that with his comments about